Okay, this is a Ford, but I think I can show you what I wanted to try to show you and explain to you what you need to do to make those struts work the way you want. This setup is a little bit different. I think you're going to find on the Mazda than the Fords. I think you're going to find that this has probably got 2 bolts here, and they're going to be spaced like that, and it's going to be clamped like this. This right here is actually a setup that's already off of it. You can see this slot here. Most of those imports, if I'm not mistaken, have a double deal. It's got 2 holes in it. It's slotted like this, and if it's not slotted, you can slot it to get alignment if you need to. That's how the front end shops will align one to get your caster and camber correct. But anyway, what we're dealing with here is your strut. This is the strut that's off, and as you can see, this one's just dropping down, and that's the problem that you're having. The only thing that's keeping it up is the spring tension, the coil spring, which is up there. The coil is contained on this. There's a cap on the top of it, which you can't really see, but you can here. This bolt. It's got a big washer on the bottom side that holds this cap. Is right on the very top of the spring. And when you take this out, these 3 bolts will take that whole assembly out. These 3 bolts and this clamp right here, this clamp bolt, yours, like I said, maybe 2, or maybe even more than that. And that'll take that strut out in one whole assembly. And if you want to gain some height on it, probably the best thing to do is to take the spring out and take it apart and see if you can measure the diameter, the outside diameter of the spring, and the height, and count the coils, and see if you can find another vehicle that's got the same outside diameter coil that will go down in here. See, the outside coil is just a little bit bigger on this one than this set here, where it sits into it. So you might want to watch for that. You could put a taller spring in it, and what it'll do is it'll make the strut set higher, because the struts normally under load got a little bit of push, they're pushed down a little bit. I don't know how much height you're going to gain by doing that. Probably not more than a couple of inches at the most. But my suggestion, if you want to gain some height, would be to build you a block out of some flat steel that fits between this upper tower here. The only trouble is you're going to have to figure out a way to bolt these to get these bolts to extend those. You might double nut them, use a long nut maybe. There's some of those, there's some stuff available, some nuts available that are, real long, that you can thread this into one side of it and put a lock nut under it, and then thread the other side into it and put a bolt into it. And of course, if you do it that way, I would Loctite all the bolts together. Use Loctite on them so they don't come loose. But then you could space this down. This piece here would actually be however much you spaced it down. But I would make something solid between the top of this strut and this strut tower, because otherwise, if you don't, when you hit a hard bump, this is going to just shove up through, because the only thing that's going to be holding it's these bolts. So you want to make that spacer the same thickness through all of this. You might gain a couple inches that way too, as far as height. The problem is, if you do that, you're probably going to affect your caster and camber And because the lower ball joint's out on this, I can show you what I mean by Casper and camber. Your strut's going to pull out like this, and your wheel's going to set at a weird angle. And the only way to change that is the lower ball joints. You might, I'm not real familiar with those Mazdas, you might get lucky. There may be an adjustment somewhere in this arm that goes back, in that lower arm, that might allow that to go in or out to adjust it. So you might be able to get some of your camber back that way. But most of the time your camber adjustments come off of these locking nuts that hold this strut into place. Myself, I think what I'd start with is another set of springs. You might also look and see this one. You can see I got my finger in there between the spring and the strut. There's not a whole lot of room there. If the strut sets more in the center where you got more room and you don't have this tight spot like this, you might be able to put another spring inside of this one. And what I would do is I would cut the spring that you put inside of your main spring down so that it's just touching. I don't think I'd want a bunch of pressure on it, but a little pressure would be okay. If you put too much pressure on it, then it's gonna, if you're worried about your camber and caster adjustments, being off-road, it's not gonna hurt anything. But you don't want it excessive or it'll make it hard to steer. It'll make the front wheels want to plow real bad going into a corner. So you want it fairly straight still. But you can take it, if you cut your spring so it's just short enough that it only just touches when the spring's compressed, then you don't have a lot of pressure on it. Even if it's a little bit short, it won't hurt anything, but it'll make a vibration if it's loose and make a bunch of noise. So you want it snug enough that it's snug, but not enough to make the ride too obnoxious. Because what happens is as it comes down with that extra spring in there, it's going to load that second spring, and it makes it harder to push the front end down. So it'll make the front end less likely to bounce off the ground. But it also will make the front end want to bounce off the tires when it hits. So it's going to make the front end do a bounce, kind of like the cars with the hydraulic shocks. So be prepared when it hits the ground for it to come back up. It's going to come back up hard. But that's what I would do with it. I would just look around, find me a stiffer spring to take the place of that one, or one that's a little bit taller that's the same diameter, or put another one inside of it. That's what I'd suggest doing. Either way, putting one inside of it would probably be the strongest way to go, because if you find another one that's bigger, it's taller, it's still going to be soft and want to squish down. But you could use, my suggestion would be to find a set of helper springs like you would put on I don't know if you're familiar with the old, we gotta come by my old bogger truck here. If you can find some of the old coil springs that used to go in place of they used to have a bracket that bolted onto the frame, and then they come down on top of the springs, and they used to set right on top of this piece here, and then the bracket stuck out from up here, and it allowed the spring to set here, and it made helpers. Some of those kind of helpers might work, might fit inside of there. They're not very big in diameter. I have some springs around here that would that I could show you, but actually I don't have them here. They're somewhere else. They're at my other place. But they're off a railroad car, so I think they'd be a little bit too stiff. But this is my other project. I built a rally car out of a Pinto one time, and it was a wicked little car. I wouldn't mind doing it again, except for I got this one working now, so I gotta concentrate on one project at a time. But I hope that helps you out. If it's been my experience that you can change those springs out. Like I said, I did it on a Pinto and had quite a little bit of success. I I put 3 inches in a Pinto because I used a spring that was 2 coils taller than the original. They were the same diameter, but they were 2 coils taller. So, hopefully that'll help you. Good luck with your project. Looking forward to your videos. I'll talk at you later.